Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Please repeat after me. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Sarana-gamanam sampunnam. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Adinnādāna kāmesu micchāchārā veramani sikkhapadam samadhiyami. Musavādā veramani sikkhapadam samadhāna veramani sikkhapadam samajasīlam dhammam sādhukam surakhitam katvā appamādena sampā. You may all now be seated. Okay. It's been over a month, I think, since we last had a sermon. And I have been thinking about all of you. I hope you have all been thinking about It is very important that during this period of time, when things are not in their normal, listening to the Dhamma, why we are learning the Dhamma, and what we are trying to achieve here. It's particularly difficult at this time because you only have yourselves to rely upon. Now normally the way we used to do these sermons, you'd have your friends or the people who got together under that one roof to encourage you and to remind you to pay attention, to put aside any distractions. So all of that was available to you. But of course now, you're all by yourselves. And as I did last week, I've picked one of you to be looking at throughout the course of this sermon. I have to do that, otherwise it's too distracting when there's a lot of movement on the video. So I'm going to pick one of you to focus on throughout the course of this sermon, and I'm not going to tell you who that is. So you should all be on your best behavior. And I usually go for whoever I feel is most zoned in, looking up and down, walking about, bothering others around them, right? So I'll pick who I believe really wants to listen, focus on, to make sure that they understand what I'm trying to explain. Now, I appreciate that, given that this is not also a video call, but also the fact that it's an unusual circumstance where you're not among others. It's difficult to this sermon for the duration of an hour or so. Okay? So during that period of time, children, I want you to put your 100% into this. What you put in is what you're going to get back. I will vouch for the fact that I have put 100%. All day today I have been talking with people and helping them to understand the Dhamma. And despite that, I want to make sure that you are not left out also. So I have put my 100%. I'm here, present, to talk to you. And I want you all to be present here, 100%. Now it may be in some of your homes, you have your brother or your sister, and some of you have your pets. I don't know. Perhaps, maybe your pet hamster wants to listen to the sermon today also. I don't know. But what I want you to do is, each of you individually, not as a pair, I want you to imagine that I'm sat right in front of you. There's no one else around you, just you and I. Okay, so I'm talking to you, and you alone. I'm not talking to all of you, I'm just talking to you. So I want each and every one of you to think this. I'm only talking to you. Now think about how you might behave when someone is sat in front of you and talking to you one-to-one. Like, say, for instance, if you're with a teacher, and the teacher is giving you their full attention and they're trying to teach you something, not in a classroom where there's lots of you, but one-to-one. Say you're in a tutorial session maybe. Okay? So, in that situation, the way you would behave when you're talking with someone face-to-face, one-to-one, not one-to-many, one-to-one, I want you to try and behave like that through the course of this sermon. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is so that you get the most out of your time. I know a lot of work and effort has been put into organizing these sermons, both on our side and also on your part. So let's make sure that this hour that we're going to be spending together, an hour and a little, we're going to be spending together, we put absolutely 100% into this so that we can get out the most of it. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to expect all of you to be on your best behavior so that you can all understand what I'm going to be explaining to you today. Now, I know that you being the age you are, okay, so I would imagine that the youngest among you will probably be around, maybe say 10, 12 years of age, I am assuming, to maybe 20 years of age, or maybe a little bit older than that. So there's a wide range of age. There's a wide age gap between the youngest and the eldest. But what I do know is you're all in your youthful years. You're either young children turning into teenagers, or you're teenagers turning into, going into adolescence and then moving slowly but gradually and most certainly into adulthood. So during this period of time, of life even, there are lots of things that are going on, both physically and mentally. You are changing, your environment around you is changing, the way you interact with others, it's all changing. And now with all this, with the virus and the pandemic that's impacting all of us, it's just added another factor into all of this. Now, I know from my personal experience in life, as well as having spoken to many youths in my lifetime, and I mean, even in our monastery, the youngest are middle-aged, but very few. Most understood their lives and how the sort of things that they've done in their lives. I can only imagine that you are not very different to them. Because we get to see a broad spectrum of experiences in the monks that we talk to on a daily basis, and also at the end of sermons on a good day, quarantine period, but normally we have that sort of number. So you can imagine at the end of a sermon, we have lots of people who come and share their stories with us. Some of them deal with them. Some of them will have problems with their parents, some with their spouses, some with their children, some with their friends, some with their girlfriends and boyfriends, some with their jobs and just family life in general, and some with biscuits and cakes. They're struggling with the temptations and how they can overcome that. And among them, there will be others also, particularly the youth. Something that is very common, and it's something that is very normal as people would like to think. And I think even in your school education, you begin to learn about these things from a very young age, and they'll talk to you a lot about how your bodies and minds are changing and transforming, and you're turning from young children to adults. And all you got to do is just observe them and be mindful of these changes and be respectful towards yourself and others, and hold them in good regard. Now, whilst I have no qualms with that, I think as a monk, I have a duty to share with you the Buddhist approach to dealing with youth, to dealing with the fact that you are a child, that you are a teenager, that you are or an adolescent or turning into one. Right? So you're going through that period of life where lots is going on, there's lots going on, whether it's education or your social interactions, you're learning about your friends and family, and your parents are starting to talk to you in a different way to how they used to. I remember in my younger years, the day when my dad one day, he said to me, Puta, from today on, a few years later, he also said, Puta, from today I'm not going to shout at you. To be quite honest with you, I think that was one of the saddest days of my life. Because it had come to a point in my life where I had realized, slowly, not fully, but at least I was beginning to realize that my parents were doing an incredibly difficult job of raising me up and instilling in me values and discipline, and teaching me how to grow up and become a good citizen of the country. From today onwards, I'm not going to shout at you. From today onwards, I'm only going to be saying things to you. You had better use your intelligence to understand what I'm saying. And when I tell you not to do something, you had better understand from today onwards that the reason I'm saying it is for your own good. And if you don't take my advice, then you only have yourself to blame, and you're going to be losing out. So I think from looking back at that, it had come to a point in my life where he had begun to have a little bit more confidence in me, I think, would be fair to say. And he was trying to teach me a very important lesson. He was trying to teach me a lesson where I need to learn to become responsible for my own actions and the consequences of such actions. He was trying to teach me that whether I do good or bad, only I will have to be responsible for them, and whatever consequences come my way, I have to wholeheartedly welcome and embrace them. So he was trying to teach me this lesson. So this is when this is why I say I was quite disappointed that day when he said, I'm no longer going to be shouting at you. Because at that point in life, I really hoped that he'd continue to shout. In fact, I was almost hoping that he would actually start to beat me up again. Because I was beginning to realize why he was trying to discipline me in the ways that he did. But he didn't pick up beating me, and he'd given that up altogether. And he said, no, Buddha, I'm not going to be shouting at you, because when I have to shout at you, I have to expend a lot of energy. So this is what my dad explained to me. To shout at you, I have to spend a lot of energy. I have to raise my voice. I have to talk fast to get across the message I'm trying to get across to you. And I have to try and use fear to discipline you. But what he said is, that's not the way you're going to learn to become an adult. To mature and to become an adult is to learn using intelligence, not through fear and not through punishment, but through our experiences and through intelligence. So I think there will be those among you who are going through that stage in life. I don't know, maybe some of you still get beaten up, lucky you. And maybe there are some of you who still get shouted at, still lucky you. And then maybe there are some of you who get neither of these treatments, unlucky you. If I were you, I'd go and ask my parents to beat me up again. But, there comes a day in your life, children, where you really do look back and you ask yourself, oh, why did they stop shouting at me? Why did they stop beating me? They should have just continued then, and I wouldn't find myself in this situation. This will be hard to accept and hard to believe today, but wait and see, the day will come one day. However, I think one of the reasons that your parents like you to be listen to the Dhamma is so that they want you to be able to discipline yourself rather than through punishment. Okay, because the Dhamma helps us to do that. It helps us to understand ourselves and to discipline ourselves. And the reason I mentioned sensuality, sensual desires a little bit earlier on in the sermon is because I think a lot of the youth of today, this is one of the problems that they have. And it's one of the most serious problems. Now, I will completely agree that there may be some among you, probably very few among you, who have no trouble whatsoever with sensuality. And by sensuality, I mean words like desire. So see if you can try and make sense of what I'm trying to express to you here. What do I mean by sensuality here? Words like desire, or lust, or temptation, and that could be to do with any of your senses. That could be sight, sound, smell, taste, or even touch. The world that we grow up in, children, particularly in today's age, and I'm sure this will be 10 times more in your lives as children. When I was young, when I was your age, I know that sounds so cliche, and you probably hate when adults say that. When I was your age, right? But that's the truth. I'm sharing with you my experience. When I was your age, so I'd say between 15, sort of, a few years either side of that, technology was not this advanced. I got to watch TV, yes, but I only got to watch TV when my parents were around. And I didn't have a smartphone. I only got a smartphone when I started doing a proper job. Believe you me, I was probably, I think I was 20 by the time I got a smartphone. Yeah, I know, that is so old school, isn't it? I mean, you all got a smartphone. Most of you will have. That was the time when I got a smartphone. Or the internet, yes. I got the internet I got access to the internet when I was aged 17. So you can imagine how much things have changed. Now, if you ask your parents, they'll have been introduced to these technologies much later in their lives, generally speaking. But look at yourselves, right? It's virtually a case of the child's born in the hospital and they're brought home and sat in front of the computer. Right? So this infant, straight from the womb, in front of the computer, and they're tapping away, playing their games and Angry Birds and Clash of Clans and all the rest of it. Right? Probably the world's moved on, but I'm old school. I can't keep up with you guys. Right? So whatever, these games that kids play these days. So it's hard to even imagine a child your age that does not have a smartphone. Do you know anyone like that? Child your age who does not have a smartphone? It's hard to think. In this day and age, it's hard to find someone like that. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong about a smartphone. Okay, I'm not against technology. I mean, I should be the last one to be against technology because I actually worked in technology. Before I became a monk, I was a technology architect. So my job involved designing technology solutions for world-class banks and helping companies use technology to achieve their aims and goals. So that was my profession. So I was an evangelist, if you like. Internet is not a bad thing, despite what others might want you to think. The TV is not a bad thing. Really, there are no bad things out there. How can a thing be bad? Right? Is a knife a bad thing? A knife? Well, if a knife is a bad thing, then you've got to throw every knife you can find at home and throw it out. So, but then next time you sit down to have a loaf of bread, you're going to be stuffed. How are you going to slice your bread up? How are you going to cut your vegetables? How are you going to cut your fruits? You need a knife for that. So a knife is not a bad thing. But a knife can be used to do bad things. Can they not? Can it not? Anything can be used to do bad things. Is water bad? Water? Is it bad, water? Clearly not. But can water not be used to do bad things? Of course, you could drown someone in water. Right? So water can be used to do bad things. You could dissolve something that's poisonous and get someone to drink it and kill someone, take someone's life. Or you could slip on water and have a fall, a nasty fall, and break your neck. So water is not a bad thing, but water can be used in a bad way. Really, if you think about it, there is no such thing as a bad thing. There's no such thing as a bad thing. Can you name one bad thing that you have at home? Except for your brother? I'm just kidding. I really meant to say sister. So I'm just kidding again. Can you name one bad thing that you have at home? No, there's no such thing as a bad thing, right? So that should become obvious. Is a hammer a bad thing? No, but can it not be used to do bad things? You could knock someone unconscious with a hammer. Don't try it with your brother, but you can. You can use anything at home in a bad way. Okay, but things are not bad inherently. Okay, so there's no such thing as a bad thing. So what's bad then? Why do people use things for bad things? Or rather, why do people use things in a bad way? This is because of desire. So some of the words that I said to you earlier: lust, sensual gratification, right? To achieve their secret desire. Reading about this about 3 years ago, actually maybe about 2 years ago, but and it doesn't matter because I can't imagine it's changed. They've done a survey about the internet, okay, and I would be surprised if you hadn't come across these statistics. They've done a survey about the internet. Did you know, children, that over 80% of the internet, okay, more than 80% of the internet is used for pornography and gambling. So when you put pornography and gambling together, that accounts for more than 80% of the internet. So if you can't sort of visualize what I mean by the size of the internet, just think of it this way. You know how many there are websites you can go on, right? Clearly that you know. So you've probably been on plenty of websites, right? If you can just imagine, just to give you an idea about this, all the websites on the internet, if you were to count them all up, 80% of all of them are either pornography sites or they're gambling sites. That's quite an eye-opener. So I was actually quite shocked really the first time I came across that information, but then later on I realized why that has to be the case. So that only means only 20% of the internet accounts for all of the stuff that you do on the internet. So it could be your education, health, whatever you use the internet for, only accounts for 20% of the internet. The vast majority of the internet, by a long stretch, is pornography and gambling. So this is where I come in with this point again. Is the internet a bad thing? Do you think the internet is a bad thing? No. But can it not be used for bad things? Indeed it can. Because the internet is not a bad thing, I am against, I'll be the first one to admit this, I am against moving children away from the internet. I don't think children should be kept away from the internet. I don't believe in that. But I do believe that children should be taught how to use the internet correctly. And the same goes for a knife. I don't think we should throw away all the knives that we have at home. I don't know if you think like that. I don't think you would. Right? We shouldn't be throwing away all the knives we have at home. But that doesn't mean that your 2-year-old baby brother should be allowed to use the knife. Why not? Because he does not know how to use the knife. The day he learns how to use a knife, there's not going to be any problem in using a knife, just the way you learned how to use a knife and then your parents had no problem with giving you until you learned how to use it. Unless and until you learn how to use the internet, I will agree you should not be let anywhere near the internet. Can you imagine a soldier? So this is an untrained soldier, we let him loose onto the battlefield and we give him a gun. Okay? This part, and he pulls the trigger. What do you think the enemy is going to say? Thanks, dude. So in that situation, you know, why do they train soldiers before they let them have guns? So that they hold the gun the right way before they fire. Likewise, children should be taught how to use the internet before they're allowed to use the internet. If it wasn't for the internet, how would you be listening to this sermon right now? If it wasn't for the internet, you wouldn't be listening to this sermon at this moment in time. So the internet is not a bad thing. The TV is not a bad thing. Mobile phones are not bad things. In summary, there are no such things called bad things. There are such things called bad ways of thinking. Do you think in a bad way? So that's a question about you. It's not a question about the internet or the TV or your phone. How do we know when one's thinking in a bad way? How do you work that out? How do you work out if you think in a bad way? One of the best ways to figure that out, if you're thinking in a bad way, is the way you're thinking leading you to suffering? It should not mean necessarily suffering in this moment in time. It is, to some extent, in every extent, in every meaning of the word, but when we talk about suffering, usually it's easier to understand suffering that may come in the future. So a lot of the time people talk about suffering in the future, right? That's why people say death is suffering. People say old age is suffering. So if old age is suffering, then you guys have nothing to worry about, right? Because you're not old yet. It's grandma. Achiyamma has to worry about suffering because she's old. That's entirely misunderstanding what old age is suffering means. I will explain to you in the future what is meant by old age is suffering. Aging is suffering even. Death is suffering. Yes. So when I say death, you're probably thinking about the last time you went to a funeral. You're thinking about a person dying. And you think, oh yes, that's suffering, of course that's suffering. But actually there's a more profound meaning to that. This is not necessarily talking about physical death. You may not realize it, but death is happening every single moment. But that's something that has to be seen through wisdom, and I'll help you understand that in future, not just yet. So, how do we know if the way we think is wrong? The way we think is wrong is, if there's suffering in your life, what are some of the ways we suffer? So, except for those two that I talked about earlier, because when we talk about old age and death, immediately what comes to mind is what's going to happen to me in the future. Or you think about old people, right? You think, well, we are all right. Yes, I'm going to grow old one day, but then I only have to suffer one day when I'm old. I don't have to worry about it now. And besides, I'm not even going to know I'm dead. So why should death even be considered suffering? So I'm not going to know when I'm dead, surely. So death is suffering not to me, to everybody else, is what you might think. But actually that's not true. I will explain these things to you in future sermons. What I want you to understand for today though, children, is how do you identify if there's an error in the way you think? Because first we have established now that there's no such thing as a bad thing. There's no such thing as a bad thing. What's bad is the way we think. So it's not bad things, it's bad things. Did you understand the difference there? Did you catch it? There's no such thing as bad things with a GS. What there is a bad things with a KS. Bad things. So this is the way we think. There are no such thing as bad things. There are only bad things. How do we know if something is a bad thing? When there's suffering in our life. What sort of suffering do we experience? Two of the most common ways we suffer, and you'll all be able to relate to this. The simplest example I can take with is a friend. Think of your friend, okay, a friend who today you consider your best friend. Has there never been a time the two of you fell apart? You and your best friend? Ever been a time where you fell apart, where you had your disagreements, where you didn't see eye to eye, something was said between the two of you, and although you didn't show it, perhaps it was a friend from school, right? Although she said something or he said something, and although you didn't show it at that point in time, you didn't sort of show that you were upset about it, you were upset. And then the rest of the day you spent thinking about, why did she say that to me? That really hurt my feelings. And then when you got back home, you couldn't really settle your mind about anything. You couldn't do your work. You were just thinking, and as you start to do your homework, you just start doodling a situation in history where that friend said something that upset you. Have you not all had this experience? So you must all respond, because you don't know who I'm looking at. It might be I'm looking at you. So when I ask a question, you can nod your head either this way or that way, so I know you have either at least understood what I'm saying. I might start dropping hints to see, so you know who I'm looking at. I might do. Let's see, if I feel like it, I'll start dropping hints, just to make you feel a little bit more awkward. Has a nose in the middle of their face. So if that's you, you had better pay attention, because I'm looking at you. Right. So let's continue. I'll give you another hint in just a little moment. Okay? So where were we? About how we experience suffering when we do bad things. You got me? These are our thoughts, how we think, our thoughts. What's wrong with the way we think? If you remember if you can remember this, I'll be so surprised and I'll be very impressed. Do you remember we talked about a smartphone and how you ask a friend of yours so a friend of yours visits you, and then they say they're going to bring you a phone as a gift, and then they bring it to you, and then you look at it and you're really happy to see it. We talked about that, and then we talked about your pet dog. This is a long time ago. And how we talked about fear, and when you want something, there's fear. Okay, so if you can remember these sermons, you'll recall that fear and sorrow or grief are two of the things which show you that there's something wrong in the way you think. Now, if you have a smartphone, put your hand up for a moment just so I can get an idea. Okay. You can put your hand down. Thank you. So if you have a smartphone, for some of you that may be your best friend. Sometimes smartphones are better than people, I'll give you that. But let's say, for the purpose of what I'm trying to explain to you here, okay, a smartphone, if you are attached to your smartphone, if you really like it, so again, let's clarify, is a smartphone a bad thing? Is a smartphone a bad thing? No, there's no such thing as a bad thing. What's wrong is bad things. Okay? So how can we be bad in the way we think about a smartphone? How can there be a bad way to think about a smartphone? Okay, I'll call some of the things out, and you either nod your head this way or that way, or so in agreement or in disagreement, then I'll be able to get a response from you. Okay, so let's see how it goes. I'm going to say something out to you, and you're going to have to tell me whether it's a bad think or not a bad think. You're following me what I mean by bad thinks, yeah? So it's not a bad thing, it's a bad thinks, right? So we're talking about a smartphone. Now tell me if this is a bad thing or not. I think a smartphone can be used to make phone calls. Is that a bad thing? Okay. I think a smartphone can be used to send texts. Is that a bad thing? Okay. I think a smartphone can be used to set your alarm so you can wake up on time in the morning. Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing if you can use your alarm, set the alarm on the phone to wake up in the morning, right on time, bang on time? No, it's not a bad thing. Okay, good. I think a smartphone can be used to hit someone on the head with. Is that a bad thing? Okay. I'm glad you're nodding in agreement. So that's a bad thing. Good. Okay. I think a smartphone can be used to give people prank calls. Do you know what prank calls are? Do you know what a prank call is? It's when you call prank. Like prank, right? Mr. Prank is when you call him. No, that's not what a prank call is. A prank call is when you ring someone up for the fun of it, and you really bother that person. I remember once we got prank calls. I got prank called. I was quite young, and my father was not feeling all that well. So this was when we lived in Sri Lanka a long time ago, and he was actually quite poorly. And one day, I don't know, actually no, my father was quite well at that period of time. The reason I sort of jumbled my thoughts there, you'll understand in a moment. So that was not a time when any one of us was feeling unwell. So we were all fine. So some random guy thought it was a good idea to start prank calling us. So the phone rings, and of course we go and answer the phone as we normally do. And so we say hello, and there's no response on the line. Not sure what's going on. Say hello a few times, and we'll just put the receiver back, and we just carry on with our work. And then 10 seconds later, the phone rings again. So again, we go to the phone, and still there's nothing on the line. So we're beginning to get a little bit confused as to what's going on here. But still nothing, no cause for concern. Put the receiver back, and then the third time the phone rings. This time you can hear people laughing. So there's a guy who's laughing on the phone, and I could hear that there were a few people in that room or in the area. So there were a few people laughing out loud. So clearly this was some kind of joke. Someone was finding this funny, but no one spoke. And again the receiver went back because my dad said hello, 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 no response, and then back. And then the fourth time the phone rang, and then this time round the guy is ringing up and he was asking, what did he ask for? Oh yeah, he rang us up and he asked us directions to his toilet. So he's ringing from home and he's asking, he's on the phone to my dad and he says, Martha, can you please tell me how to get to the toilet? So clearly we gathered that this was a prank call. And we said, no, please don't bother us, right? I don't know where your toilet is. You need to go and find that out yourself. So we hung up. And so this didn't stop. So he rang another time. And again the person asks, I really can't wait anymore. I'm really dying for the toilet now. Please, can you tell me where the toilet is? Like, don't waste my time. I need to know where the toilet is. So we got prank called. I had to leave home at that time. I couldn't hang around to find out how the conversation ended. But I have been on the receiving end of a prank call. So if you've experienced that, I think if you go online and just type in prank calls into YouTube, there's lots of prank calls out there. And I remember there was even a TV channel, or not a TV program, where they record prank calls and play it so that people could listen to it and have a laugh about it. Now, here's the thing though. My question to you is, using your phone to make prank calls, is that a bad thing or a good thing? Who says it's a bad thing? Is it a bad thing to use your phone to make prank calls? Absolutely. Why is it a bad thing? Because it causes distress to others. It puts other people in discomfort. So never do that. If you've ever done that, never do that again. It's a terrible thing to do. Terrible thing to do. Just think about it. And I remember when actually my dad, on one occasion, he tried to explain to this guy, he said, Puta, right, you shouldn't do this because it's possible that the next person you call might be a heart patient. Okay, so they might have some kind of disease or some kind of heart malfunction. And if you distress them, then it could mean the next call you make could decide life or death for someone else. And then I remember my dad saying, would you like that person to be your father? And I remember my dad saying that, and that's when I had to leave home. So I gathered that must have ended the prank call situation there. But I think what he said there was so true. His words still ring true for me. Never use your phone for prank calls. So again, what I'm trying to say there is, using your phone to make prank calls, that's a bad thing. How about using your phone to watch pornography? Is that a good thing? That's a bad thing. Indeed, that's a bad thing. Okay, put your hand down. Shall I give you another hint? I see with my little eyes a wall painting. Okay, I shall say no more. We'll continue. Right, so let's continue. So, bad things and good things. When we use things that we come across in our day-to-day lives, we must be careful that we don't use things for bad things. Now, I talked about sensual desires and lust a couple of times, and I'll mention it one more time because I really wanted to to give you something to think about here. One day, a young man came to our monastery, and I'll share with you the details that you need to understand to sort of make sense of this story. So this is a true story. A guy came to the monastery and he asked me, Swaminatha, I have a really bad habit. He said, I am addicted to pornography. I wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and when everyone else at home is asleep, and I will binge, is the word he used. So you like binge eating and binge watching movies, so this guy binges on pornography. So he says, Swaminatha, I'll wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'll be up until the following, until daybreak. So say everyone else at home wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'll be up till then. So for 4 whole hours he's up in the morning, he's up at night, watching pornography. And he can't break the habit. He says some of the effects that it has had on his life. You wouldn't believe me if I told you that he's a married man, and he's the father of 2. So he's got children. One is only 6 months old, and the other child is 3 years of age. So young man, I think in his late 20s or early 30s, somewhere around that. And he's addicted to pornography. He will wake up in the middle of the night when everyone else at home is asleep, and then he'll burn the midnight oil watching pornography. And so he tells me, Swaminatha, at 6 o'clock, of course, I switch off my computer and I go and hit the bed before everyone else wakes up, so I don't get caught red-handed. But unfortunately, he has to spend the day sleepy because he has not had any sleep. So he spends the entire day drained of energy. Clearly there can't be any energy left in him. He spent his whole night up and tiring himself, exhausting himself in the darkness with having switched off all the lights. It's just his computer screen that's blaring in his eyes. And he spends the entire day exhausted. When he gets to work, he says he starts falling asleep during his working hours. It's become so bad now that he has been called to be disciplined at work, and his bosses are complaining that he's falling asleep at work and he's not being effective at work, and then he doesn't have the energy to come to be with his family. And so, this is a real story, Kieran. He came to me and he wanted to speak to me. So we spent some time talking I spent some time talking with him. And here's the thing. I asked him, Sir, when did this happen? This episode in your life, is that a recent thing, or has it been something that you have been doing for some time now? And he said, Swaminatha, believe you me, unfortunately I was exposed to this at the age of 11. From the age of 11, I was exposed to pornography. And then from that day forward, day by day, weeks went by, months passed by, years passed by, I have not been able to break this habit. And as the days and months and years passed in my life, I became more and more addicted to pornography. He said on one occasion that, by now, Swaminatha, you wouldn't believe me, I have an entire cupboard locked up. My wife doesn't know about this. It's got hard disks with terabytes of pornography material stored on it, because I just can't bring my mind up to delete any of that stuff. It's not like I go back and watch any of it, but I've become a hoarder. I hoard this stuff. And it's completely ruining my life. I didn't realize the extent of how much this was going to destroy my life when I started this habit at 11 years of age, but now it has completely ruined me. My family is not receiving the treatment it deserves from me. I'm not being a good husband to my wife. I'm not being a good father to my children because I don't have any energy to spend with them. I don't have enough quality time to spend with my family. What do I do? I asked him also, children, I asked him at the age of 11, sir, when you were exposed to it for the first time, did you ever think that at the age of 30, you'd still be in that habit? He said, no, Swami Mahansa, if ever I had thought, if ever I felt that this was going to be the case, the day I was introduced to this stuff, I would have turned away. I would have looked away and never to look back at it. But little did I know, I didn't realize that little by little, gradually, my entire life would be destroyed. Having said this, he got on his knees and he was pleading, please Swami Mahansa, please help me. I have become a slave to this stuff. I need to break this habit and it's completely destroying me. I'm sharing this story with you, children, because I don't want you to be the next person who comes, gets down on their knees in front of me or any other monk for that matter, or any other person for that matter. I don't want you to be the next person who comes and falls on their knees in front of me and pleads to me, Swami Mahansa, I was exposed to this at the age of 6 or 7 or 8, and for the last 25 years of my life, it turned into an addiction and I have not been able to break it. My entire family is ruined. I'm no longer a family man. I have no time for my family, I have no time for my children, I have no time for friends, my work none of the work is getting done. It's all piling up. I don't want any of you to be that person. He went wrong, he went stale, not because the internet was a bad thing, children. It was the internet that he had used for a long period of time. At first it was a friend of his who had brought a smartphone and had shown him something that he shouldn't have seen, but which he did. So a smartphone is not a bad thing. The internet is not a bad thing. But what was wrong was that he had never learned how to have good things. He'd never learned how to break bad things. I don't want any of you to be finding yourself in that situation. Sensual desire is on one occasion, and if you are now studying the Dhammapada, I hope you have been continuing that. I'm not going to be taking homework because it's virtually impossible to do that on these calls, and I want to be fair on everyone. I might come up with an idea later on. Maybe I'll pick someone at random and ask to recite the Dhammapada. But in the meantime, I urge the parents to take their homework. After the sermon, if the parents can please take the homework, so the Dhammapada stanza and the story, and hopefully you are also continuing to worship your parents, okay? So that's besides the point. What I was trying to say was, on one occasion, the Buddha uses the simile of a fire to elaborate the nature of desire. In his own words, and I will, in his own words, I'll tell you in his own words. He says, "Natti rago samanaggi." What that means is, there is no fire like the fire of desire. So there is no fire that is like the fire of desire. And what he means by that, Natti rago samanaggi. Saman is not saman, as in some that is equal. Natti is no, nothing. Raga, desire, aggi is fire. Natti rago samanaggi. What he says is, there is no fire that is like the fire of desire. Why does he equate fire to desire? Why does he use that simile? See, the nature of anger, children, is with anger, you can only go so far. Right? If you see anyone get angry, if you haven't seen anyone get angry, then you either haven't lived or you've lived in a monastery all your life. So you must have seen people get angry. The nature of anger is that anger has a limit. When you get angry, there comes a point where the person who's angry, they first start with maybe raising their voice, okay, and then you start to see there's wrinkles on their, or they start frowning, and then the blood vessels they start to surface on their foreheads, and then they start sweating, and then they start shivering with anger. This is when it turns to rage. Okay, and at one point they're screaming their guts out, so much anger, and then maybe they start throwing things on the floor, anything that's within their reach. Then they start banging doors and drawers and sort of making a noise about it, trying to show their anger. Have you seen people like that? You must have. Because anger is everywhere. Wherever there is attachment and desire, attachment and ignorance, you'll find anger. So you must have seen people like that. Hopefully, not in the mirror. So, but the worst that you can get with anger is usually they get so angry that they lose their consciousness. They go into a fit of rage. They get so angry that actually they faint. So much anger that their bodies can't tolerate it. So therefore, anger can't get any worse than that, at least for that time being. So again, they have to start from scratch. That's the way anger works. But with desire, it's not the case. With desire, there's no limit to it. The fire of desire can grow and grow and grow and grow, and there's no satisfying it, there's no limit to it. It can just keep on growing. That is the fire of desire. Lust is the same. Lust is a manifestation of desire. So the reason I'm touching these topics, and as we move towards the last sort of 10 minutes of today's sermon, the reason I'm talking to you about this today is there's a little voice in the back of my head that has been bothering me as of late. And that little voice tells me that when people are in lockdown, so when people are stuck in their homes, two things will come to the rescue. Two things. When people are locked away in their homes, in quarantine or whatever, two things will come to the rescue. When you're feeling bored, particularly, when you have nothing better to do, two things will come to your rescue. One is sleep. Sleep will come to your rescue. By rescue, I mean to take away your valuable life. So you can sleep away your life, really, if you wanted to. That's one thing. And the other is sensual desire. And as I say, unlike anger, which has a limit, as sensual desire has no limit, once desire gets a hold of you, if you are unable to break free from it, He will devour you. He will completely destroy you. Why am I talking about this in the context of technology? Well, when you didn't have the virus, you were able to go outside, go and play in the parks, be with your friends, go to school, and do various things. I mean, I don't know, are you still in lockdown period in Canada? I don't know. Is that still the case? Is that a yes? Okay. So you're still at home. No school yet, yeah? Okay. So usually, when people get outside and play, that's a really good way to expend energy. All this energy that is inside of you, a good way to expend that energy is to go and play out in the park, just run about, go and play on a seesaw. To release that energy have reduced in number. So therefore, either sleep or the other, which is worse than that, which is the more evil of the two, sensual desire, will get hold of you. And because you're at home, now you have access to lots of technology. There's the TV, there's your tablet, there's your smartphone, there's the internet, there's various other things. None of these things are bad things. But the problem is, because you have bad things, you can use these things to your destruction. Remember, the man who came and spoke to me was exposed to this stuff at the age of 11. At the age of 11. 20 years on, he still hasn't been able to break the habit. And then after he'd gotten home, he'd been on the internet, and then from there started a snowball effect. Day by day, what made him happy the previous day wouldn't make him happy this day. So every day was a new, he needed something new. And that's the nature of desire. I can't really say everything I want to say right now, but I'm sort of speaking in cryptic language here. I hope you can decrypt my words. I can't really say everything I want to say. I want to spell it out to you, but I can't. I could have if you had been here in front of me, like physically, right? But at the same time, I want you to listen to this carefully and try and get the message I'm trying to give you here. Sensual desire can completely destroy your lives. Technology can be used as a bad thing. If you have bad things, you got to be careful. It might feel so innocent. It might be simply to arouse your curiosity. Then they'll probably come and say, hey, I've got this thing I want you to have a look at this. Yes, it's really cool. And then they'll show you something. Really, to children, if you were here right now, physically, the first thing I would have done at the start of this sermon is I would have asked you all to put your hand up and tell me who here has watched pornography. I'm not going to do that now. Because then I'll know how I need to talk to you, and then I'll know the extent of the problem. I'll ask you a question which I don't want you to answer out loud, but I want you to answer in your mind. How many of you are willing and comfortable with walking up to your parents and sharing with them all the times that you have watched pornography? Don't answer this. But I want you to answer this question in your mind. So it's a rhetoric question. How many of you would be capable, how many of you would be comfortable with walking up to your parents and telling them, Tati, I started watching pornography at this age It was on the smartphone, it was on your smartphone. When you gave it to me the other day to make a call, and then you went into the washroom, and then I had it in my hand. My friend from school said, go onto this particular website, which I did. And then he showed me something which I had never seen before in my life, and that completely, it changed me. How many of you would be comfortable with walking up to your parents and confessing to them how many times you've seen pornography, how many times you've watched it yourself, how you've watched it? I'd say 10 times out of 10, not 9 times, 10 times out of 10, the reality is, I know this from speaking to children like you, just like you. Parents don't know the extent of how much children suffer from sensual desire, which is such a pity. The only people who have any chance of helping you don't know about this. But here's what I want to tell you, what I want to share with you. The internet is not a bad thing. And I'll conclude with these few words. Your smartphone is not a bad thing. The TV is not a bad thing. None of these are bad things. But if you have not been trained to use them for the right purpose, then your lives may be destroyed as a result of using them. I related to you the story of the young man who came to see me. He had been exposed to this at the age of 11. 20 years on, that habit, what he first saw 20 years ago, completely has ruined his life. He cannot live a happily married life. He cannot be happy in the fact that he has children and he can be a father to them, because his entire life is now spent around this one thing. What I want you to try and, I'm asking you to try and do this. I know it's not going to be easy for everyone. I want you to try it. Because if your parents are also listening to this sermon, then they'll know, having listened to the sermon, that there is nothing wrong with the internet. There is nothing wrong with a smartphone. What's wrong is, you have not been taught how to use it correctly. The consequence of that is 20 years from today, you will be on your knees in front of someone pleading for their help. I would hate to find you in that situation. So let's try and avoid that. I ask you, children, if you can, and you'll be very brave if you can do this. This requires a lot of courage. And you'll be very brave if you can do this, to walk up to your parents, either one, father, mother, but don't go up to anyone else. Go to your parents, either one of them, and tell them, Ammi, I have a story to tell you. Tati, I have a story to tell you. Can I have some time with you privately? I have a story to tell you. It's a private story. So if they're listening to this, they'll know exactly what you mean when you tell them. So that's going to be a code word. Rami, I have a story to tell you. I know, because some of you will be closer to your mother, others will be closer to your father. Whichever one, does not matter. They both love you equally. You just don't know that yet. But you'll feel you're closer to one of your parents. Usually that's the case. I was closer to my mother, until my father stopped beating me, and then I was closer to him. I begged him, but he wouldn't start, unfortunately. Last time I met him, 3 months ago, I said, please can you start beating me again? He said, no, Swaminas, you're a Swami. I said, no, I can't beat you now. I said, shucks. So what I want you to do, children, is go and see if you can tell a story to your mother or your father. You've got a month to do this. Pick a day. Pick a good day. Some of you may like Wednesday. Others might fancy a Friday. Or maybe actually a Sunday is better. This is why I like if parents also listen to these sermons, because then we have a safe environment in which to do this. This is all I'm concerned about, children. I don't want you to be that man. 20 years from today, I don't want to find you on your knees. I don't want you to have ruined your family life. I want you, if you choose to remain in your lay lives, I want you to be able to spend a happy life with your family. Not waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, sitting in front of the computer and staying up all night, filling your brains with rubbish. If I get an opportunity in the next sermon, I will explain to you why I refer to pornography as rubbish. Because it's painting a very different picture to what reality is. I've studied this subject, so I know a thing or two about it. I will share with you some things you don't know, things which happen behind the scenes. Some things which your parents might not have even shared with you. Maybe they don't know about these things yet. Perhaps this is the forbidden word at home. Pornography, maybe. But as I talk to you and give you a sermon in the Dhamma, I have the liberty, I can take a liberty here and to give you some things because that's what your parents have asked me to do, to change your lives, to transform your lives. So they have given me free reign over it. I can choose to say I can choose what I want to say to you. So this is why I hope your parents are also listening to this. I want you all to pick up the courage and to go to either your mother or your father and tell them, Ami, I have a story to tell you. Or Tati, Dad, I have a story to tell you. And then the parents, they'll be very understanding. They'll find a safe place for the two of you to go and sit down. Maybe over a hot chocolate, and start wherever you like. Start wherever you like. These stories, they don't have to have a beginning, a middle and an end. You can start wherever you like. What your parents will help you is to learn how to use the internet. They won't take the internet away from you. I'll vouch for that. They won't take your smartphone away from you. If they do, you can tell me and I'll have a talk with them. Okay? They won't take the television away from you. They won't take away anything from you. If anything, they'll be giving you something that you hadn't had up until now. They will teach you how to use them correctly so that you don't find yourself 20 years from now on your knees with tears in your eyes, pleading to have your life reset. But by that time, 30 years of your life will have been gone to waste. So, if you're like me, you'll have lots of courage. You'll have lots of energy and determination. Pick a day, one fine day, and go and talk to your parents. And if they take away your PlayStation, you can tell me, and I will talk to them personally. And I'll teach them who's boss. So don't you worry about that. Okay, so that's what I want you to do, okay? We have a month to try this out. Hopefully, when we come back next month, you should all be able to put your hand up. I may not ask you, but if I do, you should all be able to put your hand up and say, when I ask you the question, did you tell your story? You should all be able to put your hand up and say, yes, Swaminathan sir. I said my story. I told my story. And when they put their hand up, we should be able to applaud them. How do we applaud in the Dhamma? We don't clap. we say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yes. So if you want an applause at the next sermon for having done something courageous, you will automatically become one of my heroes. I will tell you that much. Because it takes a lot. It really, really, really does take a lot for someone to walk up to their parents and really make a confession. And after all, children, the last thing I'll say here now is, all of this is so that you can be saved from bad things. The thing is not the problem. Keep the thing. Change the way you think. That's all we are trying to hope to get to. Okay, right. So I'm going to end the sermon there for today. Let us take a moment to transfer merits that we have earned, and we will conclude the sermon. Okay. So, first and foremost, let us all remind ourselves that the reason we have the Dhamma today is because of the Lord Buddha, and it is his disciples, the Bhikkhu Bhikkhunis, Upasaka Upasikas, who we have to thank for protecting and preserving the teaching of the Buddha and passing it down through the generations, through the noble lineage and in the form of the Tripitaka, which is available to us today to study, understand, comprehend, and free ourselves from suffering. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all the members of the Mahasangha. These are the monks and nuns who are resident in your local temples and nunneries. They have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine. They have dedicated a large portion of their life to setting you all up straight so that you can lead good lives into the future. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to Guru Swamin Wahanse of this monastery, as well as all the other monks who are resident here, the Anagarikas and the Anagarikas who are attached to this monastery, as well as all the friends of the monastery and its benefactors who have made it their deep commitment to safeguard and look after the monks, as well as all the other residents of the monastery, by providing the requisites. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let's also take a moment to transfer merits to our parents, our brothers and sisters, our friends, our teachers, our grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews and nieces, and to anyone and everyone who might have helped you, supported you, assisted you in tough times, and in times where you needed their help and support. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons, and the dead. And among them will be your predeceased ancestors, perhaps your parents, perhaps grandparents. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. And may through the power of these merits, they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all those who have been affected by the recent pandemic, as well as those who have dedicated their lives to helping those who have been affected, as well as those who might have lost their lives in natural disasters and calamities such as the tsunamis, earthquakes, tornadoes, landslides, and so on and so forth. Among them will certainly be those who have been mothers and fathers to you in this infinitely long journey in samsara. So may they're all rejoicing of the merits that they're all deserving of the merits that we have all acquired today. May they all rejoice in these merits. May through the power of these merits if any of them have been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the power of all the merits we have all acquired today, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahatan Mahanses and Arahat Mehinin Mahanses in this life itself and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And may through the power of these merits, you and I and everyone who has contributed to making this sermon a success, making this event a possibility, helped, supported, assisted it in any way, shape or form, be able to become one of those Arahatun Mahanses, one of those Arahat Mihinin Mahanses in this life itself and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We will conclude the sermon there. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all.